Okay, perfect. And we're live. So, welcome back to the Clinicians AI podcast, where we challenge how healthcare is evolving and what role technology should actually play in it. Because there's a lot of noise right now around AI. Some people think it's going to replace clinicians, some people think it should be used interchangeably, and some people think there should be somewhere where we have humans as well included in this. But the reality is that it's not an all inclusive answer. It's somewhere in between. AI isn't replacing therapists, but it is changing how they work. And the clinicians who understand how to use it well are going to operate very differently from those who don't. Today, I am very honored to be joined by Hunter Cook, the founder of Dimensions Counseling Center, who has taken a very practical approach to integrating AI into his practice, from clinical documentation to running his business behind the scenes. So in this episode, we're not just talking about the hype, we're talking about what's actually working, where AI falls short, and what it really looks like to use these tools without losing the human side of care. So let's get into it. Good day, Hunter. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. So you are the founder of Dimensions Counseling Center. Do you mind briefly sharing what you do and what your work is all about?
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I am the founder of Dimensions Counseling Center, and as of right now, I'm the only therapist within the practice. I am a specialist in working with professionals and leaders. So the people that are in high responsibility roles, the ones that have people always coming to them. And what I've found is a lot of them look like they're doing really well on the outside, but underneath they're really struggling with feeling not good enough, with perfectionism and burnout. So I help them move from dealing with all those things back to both a personal and professional life of living more in line with their values and living a more fulfilling, meaningful life.
That's really, really amazing. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of times people don't think about the really high functioning individuals and whatever anxieties or burden they have to deal with. So I think it's a very unique expertise you have going on, and I think it's really useful for the high functioning professionals. So on our previous conversation, you had mentioned moving from a large corporate group practice into starting your own private practice. Do you mind sharing what prompted that shift?
Yeah, so to give a little more backstory, I had been with an organization that was a fairly large group practice. We had 3 offices with several clinicians in each spot that got, I think the word they used, aquamerged by a national organization a few years back. And even back when I was part of the, I guess, smaller, large group practice, I was always shooting for leadership positions, leadership roles. And I had those to one degree or another, maybe not to, full satisfaction, but it was there. There were opportunities to move up and grow in leadership. And when we got acquired, those positions kind of disappeared. Those opportunities disappeared for one reason or another. Eventually, it ended up being that I got tired of waiting and I decided to take fate into my own hands. Initially, I tried applying to other positions out there, but they were all positions that were also big corporate environments, which was not my game. So I decided to venture out on my own and start my own practice at that point.
Well, that's very brave because entrepreneurship is no walk in the park. So I think it's brave to make your own path. And so now, what do you find is different in how you're able to serve your clients, moving from being your own clinician and entrepreneur to being part of like a group practice? How do you find that's different with clients on the client side?
Sure. From the client side, I'm able to be a little pickier on who I work with, and I think that's actually a benefit for both myself and for the client. If there's a person coming in with something that I don't really have the tools to help, I don't feel like I have to help them because I feel like that would be doing a disservice to them, and I wouldn't be bringing my best self to those sessions. So really, that's an ethical choice for me to say, yes, I want to be able to help you. Let me give you this other person that really specializes in this and can help you better than I can.
That's a good way to look at it. And what do you find your day to day with running as a clinician and as a business owner? What do you find that looks like?
Most of the day is taken up by client hours. So typically I'll see 5 or 6 people in a day. Most days I shoot for 25-ish a week. So that keeps me busy most of the time. Aside from that, I have to do the billing, but honestly, most of the time is taken up by networking and advertising, marketing adventures, social media, blogs, guest appearances on podcasts. And that takes a lot of time and to some degree, a lot of preparation for some of it.
Yes. And I know you've mentioned being intentional about integrating AI from day one into your practice. How are you currently using AI in your practice?
Yeah. So clinically, I use an AI assistant note taking software, and I've used that really from the beginning. And it helps me significantly not only cut down on time it takes to do my notes, but I feel a lot more confident at what it's putting down after I review it, of course, that it meets all the requirements that insurance wants to see, all the medical necessity. And um, not everyone is taking insurance now. I've chosen to do that, but that's one of the important things is having good documentation. And plus, that's just good client care to have good documentation. Aside from the clinical side, I use AI to help me draft social media, help me draft my blogs. None of it goes up without me touching it and reworking it to be more human, because I have found repeatedly that anything written by AI has no soul behind it. It's the same thing that you see every other person typing a prompt into AI has, and that doesn't connect with people.
Yes, yes. And what do you think with that has changed for you in terms of like your I know you mentioned it's especially with the clinical note taking, it's really accurate. But then with your time and your mental load with having to see all of these clients in a week and then guest appearances on podcasts like today, writing blogs, social media, how do you find that has changed for you with all of that workload?
Sure. I think that's hard for me to answer because I've really been integrating it from the beginning, so I don't know necessarily what it's like without it. I will say if I wasn't using it, I would probably be spending 10, 15, 20 more hours a week doing those writing things, designing posts and whatnot. So I know for a fact it cuts down on time. I just don't know how much.
That's true. So I guess a better question would be, do you feel like that helps you to be more present for your clients, the time that you have to be with them when you're not
Oh,
worried about
absolutely.
everything else? Yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not having to worry about, okay, I have to put out a blog post and 3 social media posts this week, and then I have to go think about the bank account. And like
Oh,
there's just so much
all the hassles.
that's off my mind because of that.
Oh yeah. So how do you balance? I know you had mentioned with like, AI just having this generic voice, which we all know about that. And
Mhm.
how do you manage to balance, that efficiency from AI with maintaining your own voice and authenticity so it doesn't
Mhm.
sound like chat wrote this or it's just a broad AI thing
Sh-
again.
Sure. One thing that I work really hard is to integrate my voice into the AI. A lot of, especially the newer models do a really good job at being able to take my feedback and replicating what I'm having to say. It'll spit out a paragraph. I'll go in, retype. Here's the language I use. Here's the words, and how this is generic. Ban that from ever coming up again. Sometimes it listens. Sometimes you get frustrated with AI. It's not living, but you get frustrated sometimes. Anyway, so utilizing just feedback into AI, but always being aware of why I'm doing this. Because if it's just to put something up, then what's the point? I want the people seeing it and reading it to get something out of it. It's not just for visibility and SEO.
That's a good way to look at it for sure. And I agree with like, the feedback, the prompt. Doesn't always work, but I think that's a good way to make sure your voice kind of goes in there and they remember
Mhm.
or the platform remembers that. So looking ahead, where do you see AI having the biggest impact in mental health care and therapy?
Sure. Well, I think it's kind of two-pronged. On one side, and the side that I'm a little afraid about is as people continue to use it and I hope there's going to be some regulations around this in the States, at least, regarding people using it as a therapeutic medium. They're going in, putting in all their symptoms, they're treating it as a therapist. AI can lead you through some structured breathing, and that's probably okay. But when it's dealing with something more sensitive, like we said, there's no soul behind it. There's not a person there. It doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't understand, oh, this thing that they're saying could mean that they're thinking about hurting themselves. And that's something that humans really need to be a part of. Now, not all about fear mongering here. I absolutely think that it can continue to be integrated into the clinical piece, the note taking piece. I think we're doing a good job at that, and I think companies are taking privacy seriously. Most of the companies are that are specifically around the note taking software. I think are doing a good job about that. I think it's going to continue to be big for writing copy, which I think can be good to help people reach potential clients and help them feel understood, because some people just aren't great at writing, and that's okay, but they still have some really good things to be said. So I think as long as we're cautious about how we're using it and how we're treating it, then it can do a lot of good for the world.
That's a good way to look at it, because take, for example, in BC, Canada, there was this shooting earlier this year, and it turns out the school shooter had actually talked to AI about it, like, a couple months ago, but nothing was actually done. And so the families were going to take some legal action. So that's where I would say there's that human aspect needed, because AI can just sort of be like, well, that's a great idea. Let's look at more about it, and just kind of just support without actually being like, well, hold on, let's dig more into how you're feeling right now, where the human aspect, the human therapy could come in. But without, like you said, fear mongering and being absolutely negative and pessimistic, it also helps clinicians with efficiency. And the writing part, not everyone's a good writer. You seem like you're a good writer because you write blogs.
I try to.
I don't enjoy writing, but it's very, very helpful. So that's really a good way to look at it. I think it just has to be that balance, as with everything in life, really and truly. So I guess just a piece of advice for other clinicians listening, who are hesitant about using AI. What advice would you give to them? What would you say to them?
Sure. Learn about it. I think that's one of the big things is fear is often combated by knowledge. And I think that applies to a lot of things in the world. AI, medicine, people. I think the more knowledge we have, the better approach we can have to things. Learn about how AI works. Models like the big name models work differently than, say, a note-taking software. Those are very different uses versus how it works for image generation. The more you can learn, the better decisions you can make. And if you're wanting to look at integrating like a note-taking software, talk to the company, interview them, ask them, where's the data stored? How are you handling it? How did you get this data? Because there's a lot of ethical things that need to be considered with that. Privacy is huge when it comes to this for a multitude of reasons.
Yes, that's. I think that's something we don't think we could do. Interview the company and ask them those questions. Personally, I would also be taking that into accountability as well. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Hunter, for all your insight. I think this conversation has made it clear that AI is not the threat people think it is, but ignoring it might be. Because as Hunter has shared here, the real value of AI isn't in replacing human connection or clinical judgment, but removing the friction and the extra mental load around it. The documentation, the writing, if it's not something that's your strongest forte. But then again, we want to remember there's the balance. You probably want to be adding your own voice so it doesn't sound generic. But the things that pull clinicians away from actually being present with their clients, at the same time, it's not perfect. So we want to make sure we're considering the ethics. We want to make sure we're personalizing it as much as possible, because we still require humans and the human empathy, the human voice to shape it into something meaningful. So it's not a question about if AI belongs in healthcare or not, but how we use it to make care better. So thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Clintrix AI podcast. As always, it's a pleasure having you here, having our wonderful guests. Today, we had the pleasure of speaking with Hunter, which I thank so very much once again for, chatting with us for the last 15 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it down in the comment section. I will be linking Hunter's LinkedIn profile as well as his business website in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.